Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, February the 2nd, 2026, and today we are radishing hard, and we'll take a question about weed control in the orchard. So let's do it. All right, happy Monday, everyone, and happy February. Look at that. I always kind of feel like February is the unofficial start of the growing season, at least on the front end. You're setting the table, rolling the silverware, prepping the food, getting ready for opening night. Just a couple more months, and this place is going to erupt with activity. And frankly, after a solid week of cold and ice, I'm here for it. I hope you all had a nice weekend, though. I know I quite enjoyed our trip over to the Oak Conference, which is the closest conference we do. It's literally like 15 minutes from here. So, just feel free to always have your conferences like 15 minutes from my house. It's great. Anyway, I will discuss more about like what I kind of picked up from that particular conference tomorrow. But Hannah and I had a great time. Huge thanks to Brooke and the rest of the Oak staff for putting that thing together, because it is no small feat, especially this year where funding was non-existent in many cases, or just completely ripped away from people. So many thanks to them for all their hard work. Again, though, I'll talk more about that tomorrow. And this Wednesday, I will be going live for our monthly, or basically monthly, almost monthly live chat. That should be fun. That'll be Wednesday, 9 a.m. Eastern here on the old YouTubes. Can't wait to see you there. Bring your questions. I'll try and answer them on the fly, live like that. It's a fun challenge. I don't know why I put myself through it, but it's fun. All right, so it is Monday, where every week this year we are digging into a single, less talked about crop in a series we're calling Planting and Raving, or at least that's what I'm calling it. The idea being that we want to discuss some of the crops that I don't really discuss here as much on the show and aren't really as discussed within the market gardening world. And today, the crop that we're going to focus on is one that's actually discussed quite a bit in the market gardening world, but it is the ever-prolific radish. Now, this is a crop that comes in many different shapes and sizes, and for that reason, when planting your radish crop, you have to be super specific about what you want. A radish is not just a radish. There are different colors, different days to maturity, different radishes for different seasons, and so it is good to know what you hope to get out of them, and that you can sell that crop in particular before going bananas on radishes. Bananas on radishes, sure. They are also notoriously high profit radishes, but not if you grow the wrong variety at the wrong time in the wrong market, or you grow a ton and can't sell them because you heard it was profitable. So let's break it all down. First, the two main types of radishes you need to be aware of are the short season radishes and the long season radishes. In general, long season radishes, that would be like watermelon and daikon and that sort of thing, are grown in the fall. That's not a requisite, but when you plant a radish early and it matures like into the heat, it gets pretty spicy, sometimes bitter, sometimes pithy, sometimes it splits. So the longer season radishes are often saved for planting in the late summer, because when they mature, it gets cold in the fall, and they get this nice little sweet and spicy mix to their flavor profile, and I love that. Plus, the longer season radishes can make great storage crops to get you through that first part of the winter, lasting you maybe a month, 2 months in some cases. When you hear market gardeners referring to the high profit radishes, they're really talking about the shorter season radishes, which are available in many different varieties. French breakfast are the kind of classic radish for this. This takes about 20 to 30 days to mature, give or take, depending on the season, but is a long red radish with a white tip on it. They're honestly one of the prettiest veggies out there, in my opinion, but they can get a little bit pithier, a little faster than some of the other radishes if it's warm. There are also several really nice varieties that are red, like the Sora, that I like a whole bunch, but each farm is going to have their own preference there on what colors and what varieties you want to grow. Now, if you're wondering what makes them so profitable, it's that there's really not another crop you can grow besides microgreens and maybe arguably like arugula that is ready to harvest in 25 days. That's just incredibly fast. Contrast that with, say, like head lettuce or kale, which are both profitable in their own right, and you're looking at like 45 days or so at the fastest, but generally closer to like 60 days before you get a good harvest off of them. Not to mention, when radishes are grown well, you can pack them into a bed quite tightly and harvest several bunches per row foot. So if you get, like 3 or 4 bunches of radishes per square foot, but only one head of lettuce in that same space, which again is itself considered pretty high profit, and you can sell a bunch of radishes for roughly the same price, then you're looking at 4 times the amount of revenue off the same space. So long as you can get a good system for harvesting and bunching and washing them, it is incredibly difficult to beat the yield of radishes in the amount of time. In the third segment, I will talk more about that whole growing them thing, but it is really important to emphasize that there is also a reason you don't see farms only growing radishes and other farms who don't bother with them at all. The market is only so big for this kind of specific crop. For instance, what we found at the farmer's market is that we could sell boatloads of radishes super early before anyone else had them. Then in May, when everyone else starts to bring their radishes, we had to pull back, just because they weren't selling. We were coming home with 100 bunches of radishes or whatever, and that's not worth it. Then we would come back in late June, however, with radishes and could sell about half as many as we could in the spring, but we could still sell a fair bit. So as long as we had that nice big, fresh looking pile of radishes. They are good for a CSA, but again, like summer squash, people want them once or twice and then they kind of need a break from them. Now, radishes are a crop that some restaurants and retailers will take year round. So if you can get a good contract for them, it can be worth, getting good at growing them all year. Because again, few crops can give you that level of speed to harvest and that level of profitability. Anyway, I think we'll save the whole growing part for, the third segment, like I said, but the Patreon question of the day beckons. And this one about controlling weeds in an orchard with your mind. Well, actually, no, but maybe I'll be able to say that one day. Not today, though. There are other things to control weeds with. Anyway, BRB.
Well, it's been a week and the ice is still here. Got about 6 inches of snow. There's a good layer, 3/4 inch of ice. Our overwintered flowers are hopefully surviving underneath there. Have Leucanthus germinating in the greenhouse there. We are iced in.
Today's episode is brought to you by Certified Naturally Grown. Certified Naturally Grown is the grassroots certification built by farmers for farmers. C&G gives local growers like you recognition for the commitment of producing food without synthetic chemicals by assuring customers that your practices are verified. C&G's peer review inspection model keeps the cost of certification low while creating opportunities for knowledge sharing amongst a strong, supportive network of like-minded farmers. Apply today to be certified before the season ramps up. Applications processed within 7 days. Learn more at naturallygrown.org. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I'll always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member IB Taylor, who writes, quote, Jesse, I think I've heard you mention on the show that you have some fruit trees on your farm. It seems they are not a major focus of your production, but I was wondering, what do you do for understory or orchard floor maintenance? I work for a nonprofit that helps groups like neighborhood associations, churches, and schools plant fruit trees for their communities. We are in Zone 6B. Some of the most common issues we encounter after planting is that trees are overrun by weeds or the orchard becomes inaccessible because the grass is too tall. In our area, it is primarily Bermuda grass and crabgrass. The protocol has been to establish mulch rings, then mow and hand weed as much as possible. If the weed pressure becomes too intense, it has been the recommendation to spray with glyphosate. I pretty strongly oppose the use of glyphosate in any circumstances and have been thinking a better alternative would be to intentionally plant species of beneficial ground cover to outcompete these grasses. I've been told it's not possible. I also love the idea of a food forest, but pollinators' beneficials could be harmed by the holistic spray, and the level of maintenance that would require is not something our sites can do. Most of our stewards are older folks who have their hands full just keeping up the mowing and trying to get volunteers to help pick. Can you make some low maintenance, high impact recommendations? Thank you and the team at No Till Growers, end quote. All right, so interesting question here, and I'm sure this is something that a lot of folks with orchards will have some thoughts about, so feel free to chime in, you all. I also love the idea of churches, schools, etc. having orchards. So often there's a lot of unused land associated with these organizations, so why not have some, sort of food production involved for their community? Love that. Of course, management is always going to be a perpetual challenge as the turnover in interest is going to be high, and not to mention that the time for establishment of these things is quite slow. And also, of course, agriculture is going to agriculture. It's just, a labor-y business. However, as the trees get taller, the management should slowly die back, but getting the orchards to that point will take some thoughtful consideration. Even permaculturalists who've done it for a really long time will tell you there's a lot of upfront work to get it all established. The first thing is those mulch rings. Those mulch rings, any mulching should be pretty deep for a full year of protection from weeds, especially in a warmer place, which I'm assuming this is if the Bermuda grass is a main factor. If a good mulch layer, like wood chips, straw, whatever you can have, can be added around the plants at the beginning of each season with a layer of paper mulch or cardboard, mulch underneath, that would probably greatly reduce their management. This is especially true if you have collars on the trees. Then that way you don't have to worry as much about workers, piling the mulch pretty close or up against, the bark or anything like that. The collars will also help reduce the weeding right up against the plant itself, but that will be an every year thing for at least a few years, depending on what trees we're talking about and how big their canopy is. Preferably, each location would have some sort of mower that makes sense for all of this work, like a zero turn or a tractor or something that covers a lot of ground in, a very short amount of time. So no one is having to push mowers or anything like that. For us, we also use a string trimmer, which isn't my favorite thing. It's not something I would ask volunteers to do for the danger, but also because it's hard work. However, with those collars around the trees, it's pretty quick because the base of the tree is protected, so we can just go right around it with the weed whacker without concern of hurting the bark. As for the ground cover, if you took the time to get rid of the grasses first, I could see this maybe having some effect, and there's no harm in oversowing some clovers to help in the spring. But it's still going to get thick and hard to walk through, even if it's successful with pretty much no matter what you sow there. And whatever you sow there, over top, is not necessarily going to outcompete those grasses, at least not all year. So I guess for me, mulches are going to be the biggest helper. Perhaps having each location organize one or possibly two big mulching days per year. Then it's just the upkeep, mowing, occasionally weeding, and then of course harvesting. Anyway, I know I didn't say anything in there that helps a ton, and the unfortunate reality is that perennial plants take several years to start more or less managing themselves. Once that canopy fills in a bit, the mowing and mulching will be less important, but that will of course take some time. In my mind, making those big tasks more about community events or potlucks than getting absolutely as much done at that time as possible, like years worth of mulching, will help to greatly reduce the burden. So perhaps the solution is less about a specific technique and more about getting creative with encouraging and employing the community's help. Maybe homeschool groups would be willing to chip in. Maybe high school sports teams could have a day. Perhaps the church youth groups, the ag classes and clubs at the high schools. Perhaps that's where the missing link resides. Finding ways to get people who would want to do this work or would want to help, or who are looking for community or ways to engage their community or community service, get them to help and come chip in. Anyway, it sounds like very cool work that you're doing. Let us know, listeners, what you all think. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will ratify this podcast-itution. Yeah. Be right back.
Not much going on in the garden today. Got 18 inches of snow. New Jersey. Trying to get the girls out.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show.
All right, so let's return to our radishes. For bed preparation, radishes are directly seeded, so you will want to make sure your weeds are in check and that there is a decent tilth. The soil has to be, friable, something that you can actually put a seed into. Now, radishes are extremely fast growing and can crowd out weeds swiftly, but that won't be the case for your longer season radishes. And of course, you still don't want to compete with, weeds if you don't have to in any bed. You will need to take extra care of those garden beds in general, but for the longer season radishes, you really do have to make sure that you've got all the weeds under control before you sow them. Now, for seeding, we usually use the F24 roller on the Jang seeder, but have also used the radish plate on the Earthway. Really, not all radish seeds are the same size, so you have to kind of pair the roller plate that you want to use with the seed. This is pretty common with many direct seeded crops. The Bolero carrot, seed, for instance, is a comparatively giant seed that you have to use a different plate or roller for than the other carrot seeds. The same thing can happen with radishes. You could likewise just sow radishes by hand also, lightly rake some soil over top, press them into the bed with a bed roller or something, and then water them in really well. That will be faster as a planting style, but it won't be as easy to make the planting uniform. Seeding with a seeder into the row is going to maximize the space the best. Now, no matter what you do, you will want to water them in really, really well just to make sure that they germinate well. And in the field, I usually don't start sowing radishes before, let's say early March, mid-March. In the tunnel, you can sow them as early as January. Being in the brassica family, radishes share the same pest as many other brassicas: cabbage moths, flea beetles, harlequin beetles, basically you name it. In that way, their greens can be quite susceptible. So I generally do recommend that when you're starting out with this crop, at least a little insect netting can make a huge difference immediately after seeding them and all the way through the harvest for those, lush, tender greens. This is not a crop I start in trays, notably. It is all direct seeded. Not saying you can't start them in trays, I guess, but I don't see a lot of reason for it. I've seen people, grow them out entirely in trays in the greenhouse, but not really for commercial production. Direct seeding is always going to be easier for this. For timing, we start them as early as January, though I'm glad I did not do that this year because they would not have done well. But typically the first round goes into the tunnels in mid-February so that by March I can start to have some of those radishes with the lettuces that we planted over the winter, which still, as of this podcast, are still hanging on angrily. Remember that the day length on the seed package is for the peak of the season. So if it says 25 days, that does not mean 25 days from whenever you sow it, regardless of time of year. It typically means 25 days at the peak of the season. So for radishes, that means April through May here in Kentucky. I will say that the closer we get to the solstice, the harder they are to grow in general. Good radishes, at least, because we get giant greens and small, sometimes spicy, pithy radishes. So what I prefer to do is sow through mid-April, stop for a month while the market is saturated in May, and then return to sowing them in mid to late June. That way, I don't have any rounds maturing at peak daylight. Pithiness, when it gets that sort of mealy look on the inside and they're kind of squishy, they're not quite as firm when you press them and therefore not as desirable, can be a little bit frustrating in the summer because it happens really fast. So you have to keep an eye on the radish beds and harvest as soon as they are mature. Watering them consistently and even potentially throwing some shade cloth over top can help reduce that risk of pithiness or bolting in the summer. For harvest, we go with a bunch of rubber bands on the wrist and a bin and create bunches in the field. As the lean adage goes, add the most amount of value that you can to something while it's in your hands. So instead of harvesting and then bunching later, which can be a massive job with, tangly radishes, harvest in the field and bunch them at the same time. For washing, it's all about being gentle on the tender greens. The root washer we have is a little too harsh for the most part. So what we'll do is we'll do a quick soak and then a quick hand spray or a quick soak. And when we do use that little hands-free washer, we'll just cusp our hands around the greens so they don't get damaged and spray the tops and then maybe dunk them again if the greens got dirty. Then we will dry them off, sometimes in our salad spinner if it's not too occupied, and then store the radishes in the fridge, protected from the air in one of our enclosed bins, which we'll actually talk about tomorrow. For selling, it's pile it high and kiss it goodbye at the farmer's market. That's the easiest way to do it. Just giant pile of radishes, kind of sells itself. For retail, we usually go straight into the bags with labels because that's what works best for our retailers. Then for restaurants, just make those rad babies look rad. Uniformly placed, nice packaging, clean, all the things. At market, we often have to have a spray bottle with very clean water in it to keep them looking fresh on long, hot days. But a big pile does a good job of keeping the produce surprisingly fresh so long as it starts out cool. For the specialty radishes like the watermelon radish, I like to have a radish cut open on the table for customers to see because it's hard to appreciate from the outside just how cool watermelon radishes are. Anyway, I think that's kind of the gist. Let me know, growers, if I missed anything there or any questions you all have. Otherwise, I think we're done here for this rad-ish Monday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and often meeting me in a parking lot or having to drive all the way up here to get the files because, the internet hates us sometimes, as it seems. And of course, my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of February. That's where we are now. You get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Bonnie Hannigan, R. King, and Chris, who bumped up from an earthworm to a pollinator. Shouts to you, Chris. Much appreciated. All right, so this week's story is about a young man named Jones. That's his first name, Jones B. Flanagan. And that wouldn't be relevant except that it is also going to be the name of his YouTube channel for now that he wants to start. He's not really sure what he wants to focus on with his YouTube channel, but he grew up wanting to be a YouTuber, which is a thing kids do these days, fascinatingly. And then for his 17th birthday, his father bought him a nice camera and a GoPro, so Jones decided to just go for it. He would just start vlogging and see where things went. He was a bit outdoorsy, so he decided to go for a hike and bring the cameras with the GoPro strapped to his head. Felt ridiculous, but such is the life of a YouTuber. And he dutifully sets the camera up, hits record, like walks by it, then goes back to get it, presses record again to stop it, moves it, does it again, all the way up the mountain so it can look like he's just smoothly walking up the mountain, because that's what it takes when you're doing a YouTube video. But anyways, having fun, talking to the camera sometimes. Other times he's just like hiking and hauling the camera around, showing the casual, natural life and all that good stuff. Then, however, when he gets home and he reviews the footage, diving into the many hours of editing that it will require and figuring out how to deal with so many files, he sees something, I don't know, let's call it spooky. He sees he was not entirely alone on this particular hike, but that is for tomorrow, sign up spending, on the Jones hike. Doesn't really give you much, the Jones hike, but it's how it goes sometimes. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.